Your dog cannot tell you directly when something is wrong. They cannot describe a symptom, explain a fear, or articulate that something in their world has become too much for them to handle on their own. What they can do is signal, through behavior, through body language, through small and large deviations from how they normally move through their day. And most of these signals are subtle enough, easy enough to rationalize, that they go unnoticed until the situation has escalated significantly. Today we are going through 10 signs that your dog is genuinely asking for help, physical, emotional, or behavioral. Most owners miss every single one of them until it is impossible to miss any longer. 1. Sudden avoidance of a specific person or place. A dog that has always been comfortable in a certain room or around a specific person and abruptly begins avoiding that space or that individual is communicating something real. Dogs do not develop sudden, specific avoidance without a reason, even when the reason is not immediately obvious to you. This could indicate something happened in that location or with that person that the dog experienced as frightening or painful. A fall on a particular floor, a startling incident, an interaction that felt threatening even if it was not intended that way. It is rarely random. Pay attention to the specificity. General increased anxiety across all contexts is a different signal than a sharp, isolated avoidance of one particular trigger. The isolated version is often the clearer message and the most identifiable cause. 2. Regression in house training with no clear cause. A fully house-trained adult dog that suddenly begins having accidents indoors is more often than people assume communicating a problem rather than displaying defiance or laziness. Medical causes, urinary tract infections, kidney issues, diabetes, cognitive decline in senior dogs are common and should be the first consideration, and a veterinary visit is the appropriate first response rather than behavioral correction. But when medical causes are ruled out, sudden house training regression frequently correlates with significant stress or anxiety. A new pet, a household change, a shift in routine, an absence of a family member. These can all produce regression in a previously reliable dog. The accident is not the message. It is a symptom of an underlying message that requires identifying the actual stressor. 3. Excessive panting without heat or exertion. Panting that occurs without an obvious physical trigger, not after exercise, not in hot weather, is one of the more commonly dismissed signals on this list, frequently mistaken for simple excitement or normal behavior. Panting is a recognized physiological stress response in dogs, occurring as part of the same physiological cascade that produces stress in humans. A dog, panting heavily at rest, in a cool environment with no clear cause, may be experiencing anxiety, pain, or a medical issue that has not yet produced more obvious symptoms. This is particularly worth noting when it appears alongside other behavioral changes, restlessness, pacing, and inability to settle. The combination is a more reliable signal than panting alone, but panting alone, in the wrong context, is still worth paying attention to rather than dismissing. 4. A sudden increase in vocalization. A dog that has always been relatively quiet and suddenly begins barking, whining, or vocalizing significantly more than their established baseline is communicating an increase in some internal state, distress, frustration, pain, or unmet need that has reached a threshold requiring expression. This is different from a dog with a consistently vocal temperament. The signal here is the change, not the baseline level. A naturally quiet dog who becomes vocal is often a more urgent signal than a naturally vocal dog who continues being vocal at their normal rate. Identifying what specifically triggers the new vocalization, being left alone, a specific time of day, a particular location, a specific person or animal, provides the clearest path to understanding what your dog is actually asking for help with. 5. Refusal to engage with food they normally love. Appetite suppression is one of the most reliable physiological indicators across nearly every category of distress, physical pain, illness, anxiety, depression, like states in dogs. A dog that turns away from a favorite food, that approaches the bowl and then walks away, that shows none of their usual enthusiasm at mealtime, is signaling that something in their body or their emotional state has disrupted one of the most fundamental drives an animal has. This warrants attention regardless of how minor it initially seems, particularly if it persists for more than a single meal or occurs alongside any other items on this list. Appetite loss rarely exists in isolation when something significant is wrong. 6. Excessive licking or chewing of their own body. We touched on this in the hidden pain video, but it deserves emphasis here specifically as a help-seeking signal rather than purely a pain indicator. Persistent, focused licking or chewing at one area of the body can indicate physical pain or irritation at that specific location, but it can also indicate psychological distress, expressing itself through a self-soothing behavior that has become compulsive. A dog managing anxiety or boredom through repetitive self-directed behavior because they have no other outlet available to them. Either way, the behavior is a request. A physical cause needs medical attention. A psychological cause needs a change in environment, routine, or stimulation. Both require you to notice that the behavior is happening at all, which many owners do not until it has produced a visible physical injury. 7. Hiding or seeking enclosed spaces. A dog that begins seeking out small, enclosed spaces, under furniture, in closets, behind objects, that they did not previously seek out is engaging in a well-documented self-protective behavior associated with fear, pain, or significant stress. This instinct is rooted in the same ancestral logic that drives a sick or injured wild animal to seek concealment rather than remain exposed. A domestic dog doing this is operating from the same deep biological programming, even though the household poses none of the predatory risk that the instinct originally evolved to manage. This signal deserves particular attention because it often appears in dogs who are otherwise still eating, still engaging in some ways, still appearing largely normal on the surface. The hiding behavior can be the first and sometimes the only visible sign that something is significantly wrong before more dramatic symptoms emerge. 8. Aggression that is out of character. A previously non-aggressive dog that begins growling, snapping, or showing aggressive body language, particularly around specific triggers like being touched in a certain area, approached while resting, or handled in a particular way, is very often communicating pain rather than a sudden personality or temperament shift. Veterinary behaviors consistently identify undiagnosed pain as one of the most common and most overlooked causes of new onset aggression in dogs. The dog is not becoming a different animal, they are protecting an area or a state that has become painful, using the only tool available to them when other communication has been missed or ignored. This is one of the most urgent signals on this list because it is so frequently misread as a behavioral problem requiring correction rather than a medical problem requiring diagnosis. Punishing out-of-character aggression without investigating an underlying cause addresses the symptom while leaving the actual problem, and the pain producing it, completely unresolved. 9. Loss of interest in play or social interaction. A dog that withdraws from play, from greeting you at the door, from initiating the contact and engagement that previously characterized their personality is showing one of the clearest behavioral markers of significant physical or emotional distress. This is sometimes mistaken for a dog simply calming down or maturing, particularly in dogs whose owners want to believe the change is benign. But a genuine, sustained loss of interest in previously enjoyed activities and previously sought connection is a recognized indicator of conditions ranging from chronic pain to depression-like states in dogs, and it deserves the same seriousness as any other significant behavioral change on this list. The specificity matters here too. A dog who has lost interest in one particular type of play but remains engaged in others is signaling something different than a dog who has lost interest in everything simultaneously. Both deserve attention, but the second is more urgent. 10. A change in how they seek you out, more or suddenly less. We have covered throughout this series how dogs use proximity to you as a primary regulation strategy. A significant change in that pattern, in either direction, is one of the most important and most frequently dismissed signals available. A dog that becomes suddenly and persistently clingy, unable to settle without being in physical contact with you, may be communicating an anxiety or a physical discomfort that has overwhelmed their normal capacity to self-regulate. A dog that becomes suddenly distant, withdrawing from the proximity seeking that has always characterized their relationship with you may be signaling pain, illness, or a depression-like emotional state. Both directions represent your dog reaching for you even when the reaching looks like its opposite. The clingy dog is asking directly. The withdrawing dog is asking in the only way that distress allows them to, by pulling away from the very thing that would normally help them because their system has become too overwhelmed to use it. If you recognize more than one of these in your own dog right now, that combination is worth taking seriously, starting with a call to your veterinarian. Drop a comment. I read every single one. Subscribe, new video every week. See you next time.